Welcome today, June 27th, 2026, to another Sabbath afternoon Bible study. I, Derek West, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, am the president of the Mustard Seed Advent Ministry. This is not an AI-enhanced publication. My opening thesis is, racial identity is not a pre-qualifier for kingdom entry. All who teach otherwise are delusional, and I am called to unbraid that theological flattery which has been whispered to men from seducing spirits. Thus I present Series 54, entitled, quote, Racial Theo-Delusional Morass, close quote. A morass is a spider web of confusing snares. Before I descend on the screen the title of the first study of the series, number 54.1, I add, being a man of African American ethnicity, this topic is personal to me. Still, my honest objectivity forces me to refuse all false flattery. After all, the son of David is promised to be fairer than the children of men. Therefore, I do not bask in compliments or insults when they defy the Lord's word. Fairness is defined not by my skin complexion, but by my commitment to equity. Accordingly, I lift my voice to unveil God's heretofore hidden perspective on racial identity theology. This study title then is Bafflement of Black Deliverance. I should begin by saying the title black is a misnomer, a slangism of imprecision. Nobody can define black or white. Yet humans, having surmounted 10 generations of affliction by American slavery, lose their divine Bible connection by use of such indefinitive labels, which efface their true kingdom connection. The label black, quote unquote, is a linguistic, self-defining shortcut that nullifies the strong meat theology of their redemption. When I regretfully use the slangism black, my intent is to reach your ears of dull cognizance. But I know that God now demands more accuracy, and when he calls his chosen to service again, he will not deploy epithets of trite and marginal linguistic acumen. He will now exalt all his beloved from the borrowed labels of obscurity to call forth his Hebrew men of resuscitation. The prophet Zephaniah makes this point. He says, Therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms. For all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, which is Central Africa, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. Zephaniah chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. Here the Lord promises to assemble the kingdoms. At the Tower of Babel, the nations were disassembled. So here is today's order of operation. He rises to gather that which Revelation calls his first fruits, the 144,000. They are the daughter of his dispersed. Given the commission to gather others, or second fruits, they will not use slangisms. They will speak pure language. Such communicative style is to be installed by a singular individual. For it says, they shall serve with one consent. Not yesterday, but today, the day of their rise Pure speech is the standard. It is not because he disdains so-called blacks, nor is it because he favors so-called whites, but because of another major principle of salvation. He condemns men who are governed by the flesh. The gospel of salvation is not a matter of fleshy components. Skin complexion, facial features, hair texture, etc. are condemned when used as kingdom pre-qualifier criteria. That approach to the gospel is at variance with the spirit of Christianity. Paul explains in great clarity, and remember, he is the author of Christianity to the Gentiles. So we read his work to see that to label kingdom suppliants as black or white is profanity. He says, to walk after the flesh means death. And I quote, "There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus hath made me free from the law of sin and death. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin condemned sin in the flesh, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For they that are after the flesh," I'm going to make you wait for this, "do mind the things of the flesh. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace." Romans chapter 8, verses 1 through 6. To unveil the Holy Spirit's meaning of this text, revealed today for the first time by the mustard seed, here's what you need to know. The law was weak through Israel's flesh, as manifested in the fact that at Sinai, the church fled in terror by the Lord's direct vociferations of the law. Deuteronomy 18, scrolling on the screen, explains that Israel ranted against both Christ's thunderous voice and his blinding brightness. The negotiated resolution came by Christ's promise to speak ventriloquially by way of a prophet like unto Moses, one who could bear his light and voice. And now you have it. Christ muffled his presence by use of Jesus' flesh. Hence, Paul's meaning is made plain. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, condemned sin in the flesh. Christ, with more affirmation, also condemned skin complexion theology, saying, beginning in John 6, "It is the Spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life." John chapter 6, verse 63. In other words, for sin, he condemns sin in the flesh, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us. Exactly what the Sinai church demanded. To become free from the law of sin and death then means to escape carnal-minded theology by the embrace of Christ's communication through Jesus. Thereby ranking righteousness by skin complexion is impure and profane speech. And there is another reason of equal significance. To discriminate by the flesh, a man takes the risk of persecuting God's very elect. Moses' wife Zipporah makes the point. She was a Midianite, In Moses' flight from Pharaoh, he met her in her homeland, which was within sheep grazing proximity to Mount Sinai, the place where the law was declared. She was not from Ethiopia, for it is 1,500 miles in the other direction. Jethro, Zipporah's dad, was the leader or the priest of Midian. The Midianites, according to Genesis 25, verses 1 and 2, were children of Abraham through his wife Keturah, not Sarah. Therefore, Zipporah was a child not of Ham or Japheth, but through Noah, then Shem, after perhaps 10 generations later through Jethro. She therefore was not Hamitic or African. She was Shemitic despite her skin. The Bible called her Ethiopian in reference to her skin complexion. Midian was her nationality. God's strong reprimand of Aaron and Miriam, high-ranking saints in the kingdom, and Moses' own siblings, shows his high regard for her. I believe they resented their marriage not due to her complexion, for they too were dark-skinned, having emerged out of Africa after 200 years. Rather, they presumed Moses to be their king, and they resented inheriting a non-Hebrew queen. Yet Zipporah was so diligent to walk by the Spirit that she adopted as her own mission the liberation of Israel. Proof: Zipporah, not Moses, took on the bloody task of circumcising their sons, according to Exodus 4, verse 25. But how charming. Moses and Zipporah were co-ed partners in faith. You should therefore be careful, whether black or white, whose toes you recklessly step on. They may be his elect. In fact, all races on earth are included in God's plan of salvation because all of Noah's children are blessed of God. Masonry falsely teaches that Ham was cursed black. Such is a deep racial theo-delusional morass. How could any of Noah's triplets be cursed by God when God blessed them all? The Bible reveals the following in Genesis chapter 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons with fruitful multiplication. Let me interrupt to show that Noah only had 3 sons. To bless them and him with multiplication fruitfulness is then a redundancy. The significance of Noah's inclusion in the blessing of his sons is therefore proverbial. Remember, Christ promised in Matthew 24, as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew 24, verse 37. Before delving deeper in that concept downstream, we continue the reading. Genesis 9, verse 1. And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein. Genesis chapter 9, verses 1, verse 6 and 7. All races came from Noah's triplets, even men of dark complexion. And since fruit is desirable, then all men to God are desirable. But as the case with strong meat, there are unanticipated multiple layers of intrigue. For this study, we need to know who shall conglomerate to be among the first fruits. Whomever they may be, you can know that God will not label them after the flesh. So let them no longer hang their heads low. Let not even Aaron and Miriam today's church hierarchy depreciate their value for, by Zipporah's example, the social and political powers have no king or queenship vote. Instead, let's anticipate that the teacher of world salvation, we'll call him antitypical Noah, will, by God's blessing, reveal the first fruit elect. This we can now know. By their fiery experience, they will be labeled neither black nor white. Jerusalem shall be their new name. Jerusalem is a nominal personification because it reveals them to be the Capitol Hill people of world congressional delegation. This is their pure language designation, for they emerge through the baptism of fire cited by John the Baptist. Zephaniah says, the Lord's suppliants come from the heartland of Africa, for Central Africa is the place on earth that is beyond the Nile rivers of Ethiopia. But African is not their identity. It simply was one stop on their fiery 3,000-year itinerant path before they would turn back home to Father's embrace. The Lord does not call them black because 10 generations of American slavery has been the cauldron of fire in which they were baptized. And it is their sons in this generation, not 100 years ago, who shall be the first fruits. Counterintuitively, covenant law dictates their connection to Jacob by the house of their fathers. His calculus defines them not by complexion, but by paternal descendancy. The maternal side of their lineage comes by any of Noah's daughters, through his triplets, daughters from all races. Christ inherited Jacob from God, and Jacob's path to salvation traveled through the sea of humanity by way of American slavery. It was the upstream Semonic swim of God's engineering. The name black is a misnomer then, because 10 generations amalgamated their flesh and complexion, but it sustained their Y chromosomal connection to Jacob. Many races through that time sought reproduction through them. Science today unlayers what past ignorance has hidden. The father of a male child contributes what the mother cannot. He relays the Y chromosome, the spirit of a man. You do know, with fertilization, the mother gives the XX. The dad provides the XY to make a man. The mother's divergent skin tone may blend the complexion, but she, as did Zipporah, is the primary teacher to enforce spirituality, be she red or yellow, black or white. Advancing forward, all are familiar with the concept of Christmas gifting. The meticulous wrapping conceals the precious contents inside, and likewise has God concealed his first fruits. The joy of the gift is inside. Since he parked Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat in Turkey, it's still there today. He spent the next 4,300 years in this endeavor. Only 4 men with their wives emerged from the ark. So humanity did not originate in Africa. There were no Africans nor Caucasians until God spread men forth into those territories. Afterwards, as with the feline, the canine, the bovine, the equine families, etc., Man also developed racial variation after the Tower of Babel. Let me cite to you Genesis 11. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. Let us go down and there confound their language. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth. Genesis 11, 6 through 8. Why demand more anthropological details from God when we live in an ambiance of gross-hearted men satisfied to rank saints by their kindergarten six-pack crayons? Sure, some of Noah's blessed went to Africa. It's a large continent on earth. And to them also God blessed by saying, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Be you dark or light. If these conclusions unsettle you, perhaps you have forgotten the Lord's summary words of first fruit harvest. I cite to you Matthew chapter 20. The last shall be first. What's that word? The last shall be first, and the first last. For many be called, but few chosen. Matthew 20, verse 16. The call was an appeal for education through humiliation. It began not 4,300 years ago, but right out of the 1844 Adventist disappointment. After they, as commanded, took the little book of Daniel, defined in Revelation chapter 10, and after it was sweet in their mouth, meaning it made them joyous, the promised humiliation ensued. It became bitter in the belly. But what you need to know is that they and no other church were commanded to become gospel purveyors in the world. Their Adventist call was to invite the nations to learn of the first fruits of the judgment. Many came, but 10 generations later, in the last day, the Bible has raised the son of David, the mustard seed, antitypical Noah and his students, from that gospel-purveying church to crystallize the blessed few who have been chosen. The chance to join his team is nearly foreclosed. Gather into this kingdom net while there is yet time. Let not black identity theology distort your views. Jesus defined the formula of kingdom hierarchy when he said in Matthew chapter 23, But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant, and whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that shall humble himself shall be exalted. Matthew 23, verses 11 and 12. For the sons of America's slaves, humility was their only option during that last 10 generational span. All other formulas for assimilation were blocked by the Lord. It has been a swim against white water currents. Some sought to escape humiliation through intermarriage to reproduce lighter-skinned children of Noah's blessing. Didn't work. Hiding their God-given genetic gifts from the men of the flesh proved too difficult to closet, compounding their humiliation. For example, straight hair and fair skin could not replace the 100 other virtues that were inherited gifts equally essential to happiness, even though myopic social values forced the ignorance of their benefits. Certainly walking after the flesh blinded all to Christ's criterion of virtue, the genetic Y chromosomal component. Thereby, the historic process of humiliation relegated last place to Jerusalem. This has clouded the minds of men and impeded their power to comprehend the drama of salvation that is now at the doorstep. Consider a logical analysis by examining the last 10 generations of the sons of America's former slaves in America. It reveals the profanity of the nomenclature black. It only takes 3 generations at least to efface the inherited physical features of your parents. But you can never erase the chromosomal house of your father. Even men of the darkest hue can be white men if we gauge by divine accounting. For example, many English white men, as slaveholders, produced sons through the embrace of African women. God ignored complexion and registered those descendants as English. We, by impure speech, called them black. Since the societal ethics of the time forbade intermarriage into the dominant white cultural stream, then that second generational dark-skinned son of an Englishman, by marriage to his own Zipporah, produced a third generational Englishman, a son with even a darker hue. Thus, in 3 generations, the man whom we call black would be, by God's law, defined as an Englishman. Though dark by the flesh, he bears not the Y chromosome of Jerusalem, but the spirit or the Y chromosome of his English grandfather. He cannot be numbered with 144,000. It is profane, then, to use impure speech and call Jerusalem black. It is the spirit that quickeneth. In this case, the spirit of his English grandfather. The flesh profiteth nothing. Consider the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. His skin complexion does not match the spirit of his heart. Could it be, I ask, that 4 generations back in time he had a white supremacist father? If so, then the path of his walk explains his MAGA affiliation. That's an acronym, MAGA. He inherited the spirit of contempt for God's people. On the other hand, consider the famed Hollywood actor Clark Gable. For more than 40 years, he was a celebrated white man of the movie industry. Now we find that he is a man of African American ancestry. His kind spirit also defies his complexion. His heart was softened towards his own oppressed people. His descendant sons today, if true, can be numbered with the first fruits, though they all may look white. You see, pure language is essential for the gospel. When it is spoken, we prove that God is neither white nor black. How could he be, since Genesis explains that he was not a son to Noah, and all races descended from Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth? Looking beyond that fact, Jesus, the only begotten of the Father, could never be defined by the profanity of our impure speech either. Think, how could he be black, as many in the black community so claim, when Jesus inherited God's Y chromosome? Our reckless range of terminology forces the question, if Jesus is black, then is he black like Clarence Thomas or like Clark Gable? Sure, his mother was of the house of Judah through Shem. However, though Mary, was a good teacher of morality, she could only contribute the X chromosome. Many think themselves deep, citing Revelation chapter 1, verse 15, and argue that Jesus was black because his feet were defined as brass. Time limits, abundance of deception, and human obtusity all demand discipline in the mission to untangle the full spectrum of that racial delusional morass. So I defer that question to another study. For now, I am eager to race ahead to tamp down the revolting spirit among other races that choose to envy Jerusalem's election. Before I can approach that dimension, disreputable black men, like the renowned Dr. Umar Johnson, a psychologist, must also be first answered. Even educated men can speak profanity. He tells blacks to find remedy from oppression by praying to their ancestors, such as they leap back into the fire from the American frying pan. Praying to the dead is idolatry. It violates the covenant law. It is a lure to turn Israel back to her original sins. Praying to spirits, Bible history has proven, is the height of theo-delusional morass. Your ancestors rest inanimately in their graves. Ancient David explains that they have no praise, nor remembrance, nor consciousness. He says in Psalms chapter 6, "Return, O Lord, deliver my soul. O save me for thy mercy's sake, for in death." Again, let me make you wait for it. "There is no remembrance of thee. In the grave who shall give thee thanks?" Psalms chapter 6, verse 4 and 5. Paul, before he shows Jerusalem's victory, explains the troubled suffrage of blacks due to their historic idolatry. He says, and I begin in Romans chapter 11, verse 9, "And David said, Let their table be made a snare, and a trap, and a stumbling block, and a recompense unto them. Let their eyes be darkened, that they may not see, and bow down their back alway. I say then, through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, There shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. He shall take away their sins." Romans chapter 11, verse 9 through 11, 15, verses 26 and 27. But suppose, what did I say? Suppose your ancestors could hear your prayers for freedom from David's defined trap. Why not then offer them up to Noah, the double-blessed man? Instead, the cares of the flesh cause America's oppressed to fantasize about some noble black African king of antiquity. Umar Johnson's educational degree betrays both himself and them. The heritage that has begotten them traverses many multinational ancestors of paternal and or maternal lineage, and they all count. Though to claim descendancy through Jacob magnifies the connection by the house of historic fathers to be the only significant linkage, yet to be a blessing of Noah's replenishment, both mother and father must be reckoned. Therefore, some calling themselves black may well have ancestors who advocated the Confederacy flag. Cruel people, history has proven, who delivered their own first generational children to the slavery bond market. Seeing blacks as non-human commodities, they would dishonor your prayers for relief and trumpet the ethics of MAGA republicanism. Read your American history. The Confederates were renowned for miscegenation with their slaves. This with the express purpose of financial gain. They were callous to your prayers yesterday. How think you that in death, if they could hear, would relay a different spirit, one of kindness? Instead, their empathy would be with their sons of kindred spirit. Clarence Thomas, Mike Johnson, Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell. I can't name them all. United with them, they would no doubt respond to your prayer, get the hell back on the plantation. But my one consent is that you honor God's eternal wisdom, the numbering of Noah's first fruits by Y chromosomal differentiation. This noble formula of paternity is exemplified by ancient David. He was a bona fide pure Jew. This by the Lord's standard, but not by the opinions of his Hebrew community. They too suffered from delusional morass, despite Jesse, his lofty father. David's mother, the tributor of his X, not Y, but X chromosome, was not Hebrew. She was a Canaanite. She was of the real people of Noah's curse. This weight of his non-Hebrew heritage became an affliction from both sides of David's family tree, according to Psalm 69. But to God, that affliction was a forging fire of pre-qualification for the highest seat, the throne of Israel. It taught David to swim to salvation like the salmon against the raging currents. This, that he may be the ultimate advocate for the oppressed. The Black American experience is the scorching fire that has likewise refined them. To paint the picture, I take you back to the year 1808. It began the progressive path of our first fruit tally through Noah's multiplication commission. Unique in world history, capitalists began selective breeding to produce high-quality slaves because importation of African slaves then, in 1808, became outlawed. Like dousing embers with gasoline, America's wealth exploded. It exceeded all other industries combined, including gold, agriculture, etc. By 1860, after 40 years, just one state, Virginia, not mentioning them all, but just one state recorded slave reproduction to equal 300,000. One Virginian slaveholder boasted a breeding production of 6,000 children in 1850. Complex math multiplier tables can extrapolate that success nationwide. Ironically, Noah's mission. In sum, that exploitation forged America by 1860 to be an economic powerhouse. Selectively prized black males were forced upon girls as young as 13, producing children to never know their fathers. Mothers losing their children before age 12 also suffered in that vexation. Thusly, this episode in human history did not go unnoticed by Bible prophecy. God labeled the victims of this transactional currency crime by the phrase, quote, the fatherless, close quote, applying it to Jerusalem. Of them, David said in Psalms chapter 10, the poor committeth himself unto thee. Thou art the helper of the fatherless. Break thou the arm of the wicked and evil man. Lord, thou hast heard the desire of the humble. Thou wilt prepare their heart Thou wilt cause thine ear to hear, to judge the fatherless and the oppressed, that the man of the earth, that who? Who's the man? That the man of the earth may no more oppress. Psalms 10, verses 14 through 18. These deeds were meant for evil, but God used it as his genetic formula to refine Israel, his first fruits of Noah's blessing, that they may save the world. Of this fiery passage, Paul said in Romans 11, now if the diminishing of them be the riches, be the what? Now if the diminishing of them be the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Israel shall be saved. Romans chapter 11, verses 9 through 12, verse 25 and 26. In plain language, such was a multiplication extravaganza for the last end of Jacob. But in addition to the grand prize of becoming the first fruits, resurrection is another compensation, since the short miserable life of a slave will then be made eternally joyous. And more than that, their descendants, they will recognize as the first fruits, having never gone to the grave, will be empowered in the eternal kingdom. Ergo, the capital city named Jerusalem. The end then shall be marvelous. We can rightfully compare it to freedom from the oppression of the womb. A life of endless prosperity may become our gift after 9 months of captivity in the womb. This is the message of Noah's double blessing. Consider the disciples of today under the mustard seed. Do not they exemplify his blessed sons and daughters? Of a truth, they do, for the world shall again be saved by the long, strenuous tutelage of antitypical Noah. After all, I remind you again, Matthew 24 says, as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew 24, verse 37. But it is unwise for some to covet the first fruit exaltation of Jerusalem. Not only because their own maternal lineage is part and parcel of the first fruits, but more especially is it stupid since such men unwittingly refuse the divine appeal of their higher calling, the offer to become Jerusalem's superiors. The 1844 Adventist call to evangelism, cited above, was an appeal to educate Jerusalem from her shackles. It was then a call to receive the blessing of Noah and his sons. In other terms, it was a call to become a shepherd of the first fruit. As angels are to men, shepherds are to sheep or men of lower station. Thus, Christian antipathy against the 1844 Adventists was, in fact, a flagrant refusal to elevate themselves above Jerusalem to become their deliverers, whom Paul said would emerge and come out of Zion. Hear how Revelation 7 puts it. It says, beginning with verse 2, and I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, saying, hurt not the earth till we, pausing. The pronoun we expresses a plurality of saints, whom I contend are Noah and his disciple contingency, saying, hurt not the earth till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. To seal in the forehead is to be a teacher. And there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. These are the first fruits unto God and unto the Lamb. Revelation chapter 7, verses 2 through 4, and chapter 14, verses 3 and 4. This promise to become elevated above all the children of Noah was also declared by Christ to his last day disciples. Instead of envying Jerusalem, they were given even a higher estimation. The Lord said of the highest in the kingdom, quote, "Neither pray I for these 11 disciples alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word. And the glory which thou gavest me, I have given them." John chapter 17, verses 20 and 22. Here now, the reason why you should not envy. You were promised a station comparable to the glory which the Father gave to Christ. The Adventist path since 1844 was a dogged and collateral upstream trek of humiliation. Remember, many were called, but for this mission of grandeur, only a few Christians, those who prevail today by this upshoot of Adventism, are the chosen. This ranking is expressed proverbially by Paul's illustration of Gentile grafting. To facilitate his example, I bring to your screen its graphic illustration. The olive tree representing Israel. Then you see God's severity, his removal of the branch. The roots not shown on the graphic represent Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Their contribution still remains the same. Notice the immature branches and consider them to be the chosen among all Gentiles. Men who elected to advance to higher must receive Adventist graduation. They are tenderly wrapped into a bulb that they may access the nutrients of the roots. Paul calls them not the first fruits, be clear, nor does he call them the root. Paul calls them the lump. This is Zion, the house of David, the overcomers from the Adventist movement. His disciples are carefully vested in the lump, both united and hidden by the Lord's protective wrapping. This until the day of their exposure to the world. They do not envy Jerusalem, for their zeal is to produce them as the eventual first fruit. But the central lesson to garner is that all four, the root, the lump, the branches, and the first fruit, are holy unto God. Paul affirms, reverting back to Romans 11, "And David saith, let their table be made a snare, and a trap, and a stumbling block. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. And so all Israel shall be saved. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob." Romans 11, verse 9, 10, 15, 16, 25, 26. How did your church respond to the Adventist call to redeem Israel since 1844? If with pure language, then you have already joined David's merry band as the holy lump, now to be uncovered. Today, you still can reject false coloration, avoid racial, delusional morass, and return with us on a pure path back to the home of our spawning. The sins of Jerusalem's forefathers by covenant has produced the fire of their affliction. But hang your heads love no longer. By this commensurate Adventist call, today is the day of our eternal glory. We shall walk by the Spirit. Complexion doesn't matter. Our connection by the house of our fathers links us to Jacob. This message, our first study, the bafflement of black deliverance, has begun the erasure of our identity confusion. As the prodigal son, Father longs for Jerusalem to return back home. Today, Noah leads you from the pigsty of humiliation, that with us you may upwardly journey. We have traveled far away from God. Now, let us turn back home. The yoke of sin for too long we've trod. Now, we're coming home. No matter how the world feels, God does not hate us. May God transform your heart as you meditate on this subject. And with that, we bring this study, the bafflement of black deliverance, to a close.